Are you looking to take your personal finances to the next level? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Monday Money Tip Podcast, presented by I Was Broke, Now I'm Not, with your host, Joseph Sangl.
Well, welcome to episode number 48 of the Monday Money Tip Podcast. My name is Joseph Sangl, and I am fired up about today's topic and my co-host for today. And remember, my co-host Megan is out because she had her baby boy, Logan Scott. And she'll be back here in a few weeks for the podcast. But in the meantime, I'm having a variety of co-hosts. And today, if you've ever interacted with I Was Broke, Now I'm Not, there's a good chance you've gotten an email or talked to my co-host. My co-host today is my longtime friend and co-worker, David Nimmons. How are you doing today?
Man, I'm doing well, Joe.
Are you fired up to be a part of the podcast? Is this your first ever appearance on a podcast?
I believe so.
That's awesome. You guys should watch it on YouTube because he's very awkward, and I love it so much. Tell everybody what we're going to talk about today.
Today's topic is the U.S. national debt seems to continue to rise. Is there something that I can do to help begin to lower this number?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have a spare $1 trillion?
I do not, unfortunately not.
Well, short of that, we're going to dive into that. That's going to be great. But first, it's that great time. You know what time it is. Let's go.
Now it's time to get caught up with our current money events.
This portion of the Monday Money Tip Podcast is sponsored by I Was Broke, Now I'm Not. Utilize the Debt Freedom Date calculator to determine when you'll be debt-free. It will provide vision for your future and fuel power to you toward financial freedom. Visit the website, www.iwbnin.com. Click on the tools and select debt to find all our debt calculators. And the best part, all our tools are free.
Yes, that's right. That was very good. And so we do like to give away those free templates. They're very helpful for you in your financial journey to a fully funded life. And today, for current money events section, I'm going to talk about personal debt. We're going to talk about national debt for the main thing, but I'm going to talk about personal debt today. And today I want to talk about, some articles that I've read. I've got an article from Reuters. I think that's how you pronounce it. It looks like Reuters almost, but it's Reuters news service. And it said this was the headlines, that U.S. household debt rises to $13.3 trillion in the second quarter. Isn't that awesome? That's a lot of debt. And I got some quotes from it that I think are interesting. I just wanted to share them with you. And one of them is this, that Americans' borrowing reached $13.29 trillion in the second quarter, up $454 billion from a year ago. So nearly $0.5 trillion it went up. Marking a 16th consecutive quarter of increases. By my calculation, 16 quarters equals 4 holes. So that's 4 years in a row. That's a New York Federal Reserve report that they said released on the Tuesday before they put together this article. And the level of U.S. consumer debt was $618 billion higher than the previous peak of $12.68 trillion in the third quarter of 2008. And it was 19.2% above a post-global credit crisis low set in the second quarter of 2013, the New York Fed said. So what does that mean? It means that we did not learn our lessons, and now we as a collective group of Americans are back to the borrow type of mindset. And Americans certainly feel very, very comfortable with debt, and they have been acquiring more of it at record paces. Another great line that I saw is that the rise in indebtedness did not make it more difficult for borrowers to meet their monthly payments last quarter. So think about what that said, that the rise in indebtedness, it didn't make it any more difficult for borrowers to meet their monthly payments last quarter. So how did they measure that? They measured that because people are paying their bills on time. So what does that mean? It means income growth is compensating for their rise in debt. But we know what happens when things go down, right? What happens? Do you get phone calls?
Yes.
Yes. And what do they say? Debt happened. It was my mistake. What do they tell you? Tell people what they say to you. What do people say to you? You should watch this on YouTube. He's like, they don't say anything. What do they say? Do they cry? Are they upset?
The people calling?
Yeah.
No, they're like, pay me.
Oh, they want money.
Yeah, they want you to be paid.
They feel like we're a grant service. We give them free money, and it's someone else's fault, and they play the role of a victim. A lot of them do. Yeah. But watch this. You know what? When people are spending the money, they have a lot of fun. They get the high of spending, but then it takes a long time to pay it back.
Yeah.
And, you can go buy a new car and you can buy that in a couple hours and you'll spend a year or more's worth of income in that one moment. And it doesn't get paid off in a 3-hour period. It takes years for most people. And so I think that's interesting. Right now, they're not feeling the pain of their financing decisions. They're going to feel the pain. And we at I Was Broke Now I'm Not are going to be there ready to help them when they start calling us. A couple other things I saw is notably the pace of student loans turning seriously delinquent slowed to 8.6% from 8.9%. So people are paying those student loans on time. Get fired up. I know there's a lot of talk in the political circles about student loans being paid off for people. It's never going to happen, people. It's never, ever, 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 ever going to happen. So if you're counting on a politician to pay off your debt, good luck with that. That's not ever going to happen. Because if they did that, they would have just a complete riot from people like me who paid back his student loans. Where's my check? Here's what I know. People sign their name to the line, and they don't want to be bound to their commitments anymore. But let me tell you something. I signed my name to the line. I paid back my commitments. So should the other people who did that. And so I do think there's serious issues with student loans and the cost of education, and that it should not be allowed to run up a $120,000 student loan debt for a degree in underwater basket weaving. You should definitely be training people to be employable. That'd be really good. But let me continue on my current money events section. A couple other lines from this article is the amount of student loans grew to $1.41 trillion in the second quarter, up $61 billion from a year before. So think about that. For the election cycle of 2015 and 16, it was all about student loans and the enormous power of student loans strangling growth. And yet, is America listening? No, we have more. We have $61 billion more. Also, total auto debt increased to $1.24 trillion, $48 billion above a year ago. So here's my statement as I summarize today's current money events, is that in spite of all the powerful work done by Dave Ramsey, in spite of all of my live events and teaching, in spite of all the previous work by the Larry Burkett and Howard Dayton at Crown, the amount of debt continues to launch upwards. Does this mean we're ineffective in our teaching? I ask myself that question. Does it mean we're wrong? Does it mean we should start teaching differently? Maybe the answer is yes. Maybe the answer is no. But what I do know is this. Those who acquire debt require higher income to support those debt payments. And in economic downturns, those people will have boatloads of debt, and they're going to pay a very, very severe penalty and price. So my final statement is a 5-word phrase. Be very cautious, my friends, with your personal debt. And that's it for today's current money events section. Let's move on to a success story. Do you have one for us?
Absolutely. Several years back, you came to Bowling Green, Kentucky, and spoke at Crossland Community Church. Just wanted you to know that you sparked something in me and my husband. We are debt-free. We paid off our mortgage in full. Thanks again. You did make a difference in our life. And that's from Rachel.
Yeah, Rachel. Way to go, Rachel. We're so excited to hear that story. And a couple things that I want to share about that. We always love success stories. You can email them to us at info@iwasbrokenowimnot.com. We really, really want to hear your success stories. That's what fuels us, empowers us to do what we do. But, I hear it starts out with 2 words. What are those first 2 words that Rachel wrote you?
Debt-free.
No, she wrote 2 words.
Oh, several years back.
Yeah.
It takes a while.
Yeah, it takes a while. That's right. It takes a while. Several years back. So it takes a while to become debt-free. It just doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a couple minutes. And she says it sparked something. But that is a goal of ours, is to be a catalyst, to help people think about money differently. But man, it took a while. And that's what I want each of you to know, that money's a journey, not a moment. You're climbing up the ladder to live a fully funded life. And what Rachel is saying is she just accomplished rung number 7 of the ladder. And that allows her to move up to rung number 8 easily, which is to contribute 30% or more of your gross income to tax advantage investments. And it's going to position Rachel and her husband to live a fired up, fully funded life. We're super excited for that. And so that brings us to the teaching component of the podcast. And so read that question to everybody again about what we're going to address today.
It says the U.S. national debt seems to continually rise. Is there something that I can do to help begin to lower that number?
Well, it does continue to rise, and that's a regrettable thing. One of the things that I wanted to talk about with this national debt is if we are trying to solve a problem, we need to define where we're at right now. And so right now, our national debt is where? Share that with everybody.
That is a high number. Is that 22 trillion?
Yes.
276 million.
Billion.
830,819,158 dollars.
We did that in concert. That was awesome.
Man, that's a lot
Teamwork.
of money.
That's right. That's the national debt, $22.276 trillion.
Woo!
And if you divide that between every single American citizen, that's $67,736 per citizen, man, woman, and your children. And if you look at it divided by taxpayer, because not everybody's a taxpayer, then it's $181,523 per taxpayer. That is really high. Now, here's the question is, how do we address this? How do we as an individual? I mean, this is a monumental, astronomical figure, and it can cause you to be overwhelmed. But here's what I would say is you got to start by recognizing that we elect a representative government. And as you've just heard in the current money events section, we as Americans have a collective appetite for debt. And this means we elect people that are representative of us. Is it any wonder that we have a government that spends more than it produces in taxes? Think about it. Collective whole as Americans spend more than we make, so do the people we send to Washington. And so if you're Canadian, you're from another country listening to this, there's a good chance your country has the same issue. Many, many great countries have become debtor nations. And so I encourage you to get involved with this. And here's how you fix it. Number one, it starts with you. It starts with you. To maximize your financial future, you have to operate your finances on a budget. You should just do it. David, do you have a budget?
Absolutely.
You have a budget. You and Amanda, you prepare a budget, and you kind of have guardrails, right?
Absolutely.
So tell everybody kind of how you do that.
Absolutely. We know where we're going to overspend, whether that's food, date nights, entertainment, things like that. So there's guardrails there to be able to have where we're not going to go off the ditch, off to the ditch, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so having those guardrails each and every month, especially using cash for categories that might be impulse. I mean, that's where my wife, Bride, Amanda, and myself, that's where we live.
Yeah, that's great. And as a result, they're winning with their money. And so let's just rattle off what it means to start with you. Number one, you must operate on a budget. You should just do that. If you've listened to 48 episodes of this podcast and you don't have a budget, shame on you. Don't listen to another one until you do a budget. Like, for real. Another one is you should approach debt with great caution. You should just be very cautious. And another thing you should operate under is that financial margin, it's desirable and achievable. You can have saved money. So make it so. How do you do that? With a budget. And you should also recognize that it's worthwhile to invest for the future, for you and your children. So invest away. It starts with you. You're listening to this podcast, you're driving down the road. Let me ask you a question. Do you have a budget for the money you're going to receive in the next month? In that budget, do you have saving? Do you have giving? Do you have investing? Do you have the things that will absolutely set you up for financial success? Or are you positioning yourself for the rat race and the hamster wheel? It starts with you. We will not elect an elected representative government that manages money well until we as a collective group of Americans are managing our personal finances well. That's just a fact. So it starts at home. Start with train your children, train your grandchildren. And the second thing I encourage you to do is vote. Vote. You've got to vote. You got to make this one of the issues you look at when you're looking at candidates. It's not the only issue, but it's certainly an important one we must pay attention to. And I know this. We usually won't fix problems until they're screaming and hollering and foaming at the mouth in front of us. But we have got to vote. And this has got to be one of the things that you vote on. You need to vote people that are, they call them fiscally conservative or financially savvy. I don't know what you call it. I call it people that know how to have a budget and know how to follow it and aren't worried about going and getting their amount of ridiculous spending for their own initiatives and going back home and saying, we got this amount of money, and no one's answering the question, how are we going to pay for it? Both sides of the equation are true for your household. It should be true for all of your elected officials, locally, regionally, statewide, and for the national government. And the third one is an expansion of voting. It's to use your voice. Use your voice. You have a voice. You have a written voice. You have a writing voice. You have a typing voice. Use it. Write your representatives. It's very easy to find out how to write your representative and urge them to vote for a balanced budget, for reduction of the national debt. Hey, right now, I would take just no more expansion of the national debt. How about you?
Absolutely.
I mean, the average debt, get this, David, is going up over $4 billion a day. $4 billion a day. So if you wrote a check that cleared, could you do that for $4 billion?
No.
Okay. Well, are you close? Yeah. I'm taking it as a no. But $4 billion, if you wrote a check to the federal government for $4 billion, it would stop the debt from going up one day. After that, it's back to $4 billion a day. So Warren Buffett, he could go about 20 days and then it's over. He's done. That's crazy. And so we got to fix that. Urge them to vote for that balanced budget, for reduction of the national debt, and for a sustainable financial future, and for financial accountability. And if you do those three things, and you do them on a regular basis, and if you got your friends, your family, and your neighbors to start with themselves to have that balanced budget and to vote regularly, vote early, vote often. Every Tuesday, show up and say, I'm ready to vote. What's your vote? There is no election. Yes, there is. Less taxes. Balanced budget. And then the third thing is use your voice. Use your voice. Whatever it is you're passionate about, including finances, make sure that you use your voice because it's going to really help you advance this thing of fiscal accountability and help us manage well. You know, there's a helpful tool that I like to share, which is the usdebtclock.org. usdebtclock.org allows you to see exactly where our debt is right now. And Ronald Reagan had a great quote that I want to speak about for a minute, where he said, we don't have $1 trillion debt because we haven't taxed enough. We have $1 trillion debt because we spend too much. And he's talking about $1 trillion debt. Now, you read off a number earlier. We are 22 times that, headed to 23 times that. $22.726 trillion of debt. And that's in what, 39 years or so?
Yeah.
Pretty incredible. And so that's how you can address this. No, if you get your taxes and it's the 1040 form, there's a box to say, would you like to donate your refund to reduce the federal deficit and the national debt? Don't check that box.
Have you ever checked that box?
Never. I'm never going to check that box. Even if my tax refund was 31 cents, it's not going to happen because that is the definition of giving money to your crazy Uncle Rico, who is just spending money like crazy and never has any money. And if you give him money, it's going to disappear and he's going to need money again tomorrow because his habits, the systems he's put in place in his life just are not going to help him move forward and make progress and definitely aren't going to help him climb the ladder. And so I didn't know if you had any thoughts you wanted to share about the national debt. Are you passionate about this, or is this just something that you're like, oh my goodness, we whatever. Can we go out to eat?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That's awesome. Any other thoughts you want to share about it?
I want to put you on the hot seat, and I want to put you on the hot seat and ask you some questions.
Oh.
Are you ready, Joe Sangl?
That's great. That's how we like to close out the podcast.
All right. Number one, what are your pet peeves?
My pet peeves are hot seat questions. No, that was pretty good. Did you like that? Slam. No, one of my pet peeves is when people put the toilet paper on backwards and it peels off the back instead of over the top towards you. That's just absolutely wrong. And everybody in the world who does that other way is completely wrong.
So what is the correct way? It
has to go off the top. The roll, if you're looking at it from the right-hand side, needs to be, it needs to go counterclockwise.
What if you have cats in the house? Then you can have a lot of toilet paper
make the
everywhere.
Cats be out of the house.
Okay.
No, I've had cats in the house and never had that problem, ever. But it's just, that's one of my pet peeves. Another one is when people use the last of the toilet paper and they literally go get another roll, but they just set it on top of the empty one instead of changing it out. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I'm guilty of that sometimes.
Yeah, you should never do that. Another one that goes with that, which may mean you're the one responsible for it, is when somebody takes the last cup of coffee and then doesn't make more coffee.
Oh, that's terrible.
You've done that. It's just terrible. It's a pet peeve. And so I'm doing some counseling with David here while we're at it. So those are some pet peeves.
Okay, so I have another question for you on the hot seat. Is there a music jingle for the hot seat? Hot seat!
Hot seat, hot pockets.
Okay, what, Joe, can you live, you can't live without?
What can I not live without? Jen Sangl. That's
Oh,
a good answer. Isn't that awesome? I like to keep Jen Sangl around. I can't live without my Yeti cup. If you're
Okay.
watching on YouTube, you can see it's a camo. When you bought this for
Yes.
me, you got me
It
introduced to the
keeps
wonderful
coffee
world
hot
of Yeti.
and cold drinks cold.
Yeah. And I also cannot live without hunting or fishing or being outdoors. I absolutely love it. And my John Deere tractor, they're just, I can't live without them.
How about your phone? The phone didn't make the list?
I could live without my phone for a while. I think anybody who's kind of been running a business for a while and gets plenty of phone calls and texts can do without their phone for a little while.
Okay.
I mean, after a while, I might get the shakes, but for now.
Okay. Hey, I have one final question for this hot seat. Joe, what is something that you have always wanted to try?
Well, going along with the hunting thing, I'd like to try elk hunting,
Okay.
and I would like to try antelope hunting, and I'd
Okay.
like to try moose hunting, and I'd like to try bear hunting. Those are all things I would like to do. I also would like to, I'd like to run a very large farm, like 1,000-acre farm,
Okay.
like a grain farm, not a dairy farm or anything like that, but like a grain farm. And so that's something I've always wanted to try.
Interesting.
I don't know that I'd want to do it on a daily, yearly, annually, decadely basis, but
Yeah. So I am not a hunter. So people that listen to the podcast, there's probably many of hunters, and there's people that are not like me.
Yeah.
So all these animals that you listed, would they be like out Midwest?
many
that
of
you
them
go
are
hunt?
many of them are out west. However, there are bears on the East Coast,
Okay.
and there is a large elk population. Many people don't know this unless they live in that area, but Eastern Kentucky and West Virginia has a very thriving elk population. Actually, they reintroduced them. They originally were there.
Yeah.
They're also known as Wapiti. And they were there when they first settled the nation, and they got drove out and ran to extinction. And so they reintroduced some to great success, and now the herd is over 10,000 animals and growing. And so that's pretty phenomenal. To be able to
Awesome.
hear elks bugling in the woods of the eastern Appalachian Mountains is pretty phenomenal, and I want to go hear that one day.
Come on. Well, I'm excited for you answering the hot seat, and I just wanted to give you a preview of the next episode. The next episode, we'll be talking about the topic of Social Security.
Yeah.
So next week, we're going to talk about Social Security. Whether you're a young person just entering the workforce or an older person getting ready to retire, we're going to tell you what you need to know about Social Security.
Yes. And if you like today's episode, please help us get this podcast to other people who could benefit. You can do this by quickly rating our podcast and leaving a review. These ratings and reviews will help us in making our podcast better for our listeners like you. And on the last Monday of the month, we love to answer your top money questions. And if you have a question that you'd like to have answered, please email it to info@iwbnin.com. Who knows? It could be featured on the podcast. If you've implemented one of our tips, we, of course, want to hear your success stories. Share that with us by emailing us as well, and we would love to celebrate it. Who knows? Your success story might just make it on the air. And so until next time, make sure you go vote, kill that national debt, and do your best to have that budget so that you can prosper in the future. We'll see you next time. Get fired up.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Monday Money Tip Podcast, presented by I Was Broke, Now I'm Not. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review and subscribe. And for more great content and to stay up to date, visit iwbnin.com. We'll catch you next time.